All right, why don't we start then?
Okay.
Uh, Calling this special council meeting to order at 7:34, January 18th. So I'm just going to say a few words at the top here. First of all, wishing everyone a happy and healthy new year, hoping that you and your families continue to be safe and healthy. Hope you had a great Hanukkah, Christmas last year, Kwanzaa, whatever you might be celebrating. I want to thank all residents joining us this evening, and I want to thank the election committee members past and present for their hard work throughout this process. Based on our last council meeting and its aftermath, including the resignations, I understand that there are a lot of strong opinions and emotions involved. I would like to remind everyone that we are a village made up of resident volunteers, both on the committees and the council. And that it is my hope that we all take a deep breath and recognize that everyone has the best of intentions in making sure that we have a fair and transparent election this spring. Casting aspersions on the integrity and or intentions of any individuals involved in the process has no place in this community. It's pretty clear that folks will not necessarily agree on the final product, but I would ask residents commenting tonight not to engage in hyperbole. I've sat through hours and hours of election committee meetings. I have compared the December 16th draft to the draft being presented today, and I've noted the changes and differences, as have the other council members. Some changes provide clarifying language that was initially overlooked and that I find very helpful and important, while other edits make substantive changes. I agree with some and disagree with others. As a reminder, the process today is for the committee chair to submit the draft to the council for resident comments and for the council to formally introduce the plan tonight. The charter provides that regulations cannot be adopted until 30 days after they are introduced. So we have time, additional time for resident comments. Tonight's introduction allows the public to have notice and an opportunity to comment. We have extended that comment period through next month and expect additional submissions and vigorous debate. At the February council meeting, the final plan based on resident and council member feedback will be adopted. I would like to remind everyone to be civil throughout this discussion, to refrain from making personal attacks, and to be as brief as possible in their comments. Since becoming chair, I've asked for time limits to be eliminated from the resident comment sections, but I ask that residents not take advantage of this and filibuster. It has led to less, not more, participation in our meetings because meetings have gone on far too long. I reserve the right to ask residents to wrap up their comments and also ask to limit repeat comments that are redundant from the same residents. I understand there are a dozen or more residents, maybe the number has grown, who have coordinated a response and submitted comments, which have been very helpful. It would be great, though I'm not going to enforce this, but it would be great if there's a quasi spokesperson for that group so as to avoid getting 12, 13, 14, 15 people repeating the same arguments. You can identify yourself and we will know there's strength in numbers. That's up to you, but that's my recommendation. Your voices, opinions, and suggested edits have been heard, will be continued to be reviewed, and they will not be weighed any differently if 14 residents all speak individually on the same issue. We know who the signatories are and we respect them very much and appreciate their thoughtfulness. And with that, unless other council members wish to comment or have introductory remarks, I would yield the floor to George. Any other council members wish to say something? Okay, George.
Thank you, Andrew. So Niles can correct me if there's anything that needs to change in terms of process for this, but based on the last election committee meeting, which was January 6th, we have the proposed 2022 election rules and procedures document that was shared with Niles, and I believe was shared with the rest of the council individually, and is also the same version that is available for review on the election committee website. I know we've already started getting a few comments back to the election committee inbox that we will continue to monitor. Those comments will ultimately be aggregated in line with, as we described at our committee meeting, we will aggregate those comments into a single document to make sure that gets to the council at least a week in advance of your February meeting, so you have ample opportunity to see any comments that might have come just to the committee that were not included for the, or that did not include the council members on the position. As a very quick summary, I will try and be quick, Andrew. For the process that was the process that was followed in arriving at the draft that is currently available on the website and that has been shared to the council members. The draft started at, the election committee had 3 meetings in November and 1 meeting in December. The draft that is before you was something that was shared and voted on by the election committee at the January meeting. It was developed by taking the draft that was introduced, discussed, and voted on by the committee at the November meeting, taking the materials that were shared with the council in the packet in advance of the council's December 16th meeting, looking at the draft committee minutes for the November 15th and December 13th meetings, and my personal notes of discussions and comments that were received at the first 2 election committee meetings, November 4th and November 8th. Comparing all of those and using the November 15th draft as a starting point, a draft was developed that incorporated the changes that had been discussed and agreed upon and voted on by the committee at its previous meetings. And then I went through the draft, identified additional issues that would be for discussion, those issues, and I also did some some formatting updates, things like that, including line numbers, switching it over to, instead of hand entering bullet headers, just putting it into the automatic bulleting format. But putting those, identifying issues that were still subject for discussion, flagging those, including putting in kind of the options that we would have to follow. And the committee discussed, voted on those issues at the January meeting. January meeting was also, as Andrew mentioned, had vigorous resident comments. We had, I think, more than 2 hours total of resident comments at that January meeting. But we developed a plan in which we agreed to the draft and agreed to certain changes. Those changes were updated, circulated amongst the committee, and then has been communicated over. So it is using the November 15th draft was the basis, incorporating the changes that were in the packet, the plan shared in the packet with the council in December, along with incorporating the changes that were discussed and voted on by the committee at those meetings. So that is the plan that is before you. It's the result of a lot of hard work across the board from the committee members, from former committee members. We think it's a good plan. We know there's still a couple of things that will need to be addressed. For example, I've noted kind of 2 small, just administrative things that I will type up and make sure are shared, just having to do with clarifying certain dates. But I think for the most part, it's a good plan. It's built on a lot of hard work that the committee has done, and we're happy to show that up to the council and be ready to answer any questions you might have and be prepared for any discussion on next steps where the committee might be able to be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm asking you to unmute, Andrew.
Okay. Real quickly, other committee members. Paul, do you want to make a comment? Okay. Yeah. Well, Paul.
Oh, I was asking you to unmute, Paul. Hang on. You're too quick on the draw for me.
Okay. Thank you. I'm speaking as a 45-year member of Martin's Additions, a former chairman of Martin's Additions, and a certified member of the election committee. I want to say we appreciate very much being a part of this committee. We think this is one of the most important projects that we have in Martin's Additions, because if we don't set a fair and effective way to bring in our council members, we really don't have a whole lot to start with. I would like to throw out at the beginning here an option for everyone to consider. And that is that we have tonight 2 options. We have an option to accept the December 13th program that we put forth, which was the last time that the full committee had an opportunity to vote on that. It was a unanimous decision to accept that December 13th program and plan, and then present that on the 16th of December to the council. After that point, there were changes made in that document that we did not have an opportunity to study and to vote on. And so my proposal tonight is that we have two options. One is to accept that December 13th plan that we came up with, make some small amendments to that, which we know there are two at least that people support, and go with that program, that particular plan, December 13th plan. The other option is if we accept a later plan that has not had the full committee and the inputs that we have on the first plan, then the committee, the election committee needs to meet and go over in great detail how to come up with an amended plan to the December 13th plan. So again, we think this is a very important endeavor. We thank the council for the opportunity to be a part of it, and we would like to work with you as citizens and as neighbors, and appreciate all the work that you do, and also the people that have served on this committee for the many hours they put into it. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And just a point of clarification, it's my understanding that the committee, I mean, I witnessed it, the committee in its current constitution of 3 members did vote on the plan that's being submitted here. And the full committee currently is 3 members. There previously was a full committee that was 5 members, but the full committee, as it is existing today, is 3 members. And you did have many votes in finalizing the product that's before us. The previous draft that was presented on December 16th was also voted on various items within the draft, but there were several items that were flagged that had not been voted on by majority vote of the committee, and that's why we asked for that approval, which led to the resignations and a 3-person committee moving forward. So I think the only thing the council can accept today, and I'm going to look for clarification from Ron here, is what is being submitted based on the votes that occurred in the last election committee meeting. I don't think we can go back to a previous draft that is no longer a current draft based on the last election committee meeting.
Well, as a member of the committee, Mr. Chairman, I don't really feel that I had the opportunity to study and to do a good opportunity to make a decision on the second draft that had been edited, and so I would withdraw any votes that I had, affirmative votes, for anything past the December 13th particular plan.
Okay, Ron, I don't know how we would proceed in a situation where a committee member rescinds his or her votes that were made in a previous election committee meeting. Can you help clarify?
Yeah, I'm pulling up the charter right now. Please allow me a couple minutes to look at it. My initial thought is the committee provides a recommendation to the council. The council ultimately approves the election rules. So a committee recommendation is preferred, but not required. And frankly, the council could approve election rules with or without a recommendation from the committee.
Yeah.
Look at the charter. Right.
Yeah, so if you want to continue to rifle through there, that was my understanding as well. I want to be respectful to committee members that have been, kind of sticking it out here and remained in place to finalize this product. And so I as Ron said, we can accept any version or no version and just decide on our own what version we want to take a look at and amend and wait for it from the community and then vote on it in February. I would not like to do that. You guys have spent dozens of hours working on this, but not clear how other council members would like to proceed. If other committee members, I don't know if Leah has joined.
I don't see her. So
Okay, I'm just looking at the other page here on my screen.
Mr.
Yeah, go ahead. Who's speaking? Paul, go ahead, Paul.
Mr. Chairman, in all fairness, a document was put out within the last 2 days, and we had, I think, 20-some people, citizens of Art and Tradition, sign onto it. May we hear from the person who sent that document out, because the rationale on that pertains to what we're talking about right now, and that was Marty. Is Marty on? Is Marty on?
she is, but just give.
Yeah, I see
just
Marty.
Give a second.
Okay. So if okay, I just want to make sure we get this right. While Ron clarifies this, I'm happy for Marty to explain. I mean, I've annotated the entire difference between the first draft and the second draft. I see sections that have been deleted. I see the sections that have been amended or clarified, and I saw the note that came from those signatories. So regardless of what Marty says now and explains, and others, including Peter, who I want to give the floor as well as the former chairman, it doesn't help us in making a decision necessarily. We know where you want it to go. We know where you'd rather have this document be. I'm just trying to figure out and clarify whether the council will accept one or the other or none at all, and then do our own due diligence and start from scratch if there's such disagreement. So any other council members that are interested in speaking up, do so now, or I will call on Marty and Ron, unless Ron has already. Okay, Ron, why don't we start with Ron and then Arthur?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So according to section 602 of the charter, all elections shall be managed by the election committee. That's one important sentence. And then another important sentence: the committee shall operate according to rules and procedures adopted by the council. So the charter actually doesn't even say that the committee must submit a recommendation. I think that's just been a matter of practice over the years. After elections have transpired, the election committee has made recommendations to the council for amendments to the rules for the following year. But it's not actually required. So as you said, the council can look at whatever draft it wants or no draft.
Yeah. And by the way, just to former and existing committee members, I did note that the 3-person full committee did end up voting in favor of a 30-minute grace period, an item that had not been voted on before the previous draft was submitted. So in that sense, some of it has gone in the direction I believe that those signatories were looking for. But Arthur, why don't you go next?
I asked you to unmute, so.
Okay. Yeah, I suggest, I agree with you, Andrew, that we proceed with the draft that we have before us. Listen carefully to the people who will be speaking up tonight and review their documents that they've sent. I've looked at them, and as you said, many of their suggestions, I think, have a great deal of merit. Others I disagree with. I myself have sent in a number of comments on the current draft. So we can take this opportunity to hear residents' comments, and over the coming month, submit suggestions for change, for editing, for modification. And I believe, Ron, that we can accept the document tonight, make edits to it, and have a final acceptance of that next month. So that's how I proceed. I suggest that we proceed moving. Later, I probably will have one little item that I want to talk about, but let's not do it now.
Okay. So I guess the question then is, Katie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm asking her to unmute now. So
And then Jeff, sorry. Go ahead, Katie.
Well, okay. Yeah, thank you. I guess my whole problem with all of this is just, and I asked this at the last meeting, it's just the draft process. I mean, where does the December draft live now? Now we're talking about the January draft and the November draft, and I've been kind of frustrated by watching the process. But again, I'm on the sidelines, and that is not an insult to the committee members to date who have put, it's like blood, sweat, and tears and hours and energy. But I just need to know this draft process. Where do they lie? And I do have some concerns with the draft that was most recently placed in front of us. For example, just the voter roll language is really an area I'd like to flag. And that's all I wanted to add. I want to keep it moving. And but if anyone wants to, the committee wants to talk about kind of the editing process. I'm a copy editor for a living, so you can talk away. I find this interesting.
Yeah, same here. I do a lot of copy editing, and I just want to say, given the robust participation, the more people that provide their feedback based on their experience, the better for the ultimate outcome. And again, I've said this before. I promise that I will take every recommendation into account, and I hope we'll have a great product at the end of the day. Let me call on Jeff.
And thanks, folks. Make this relatively brief. First of all, Andrew, I just want to thank you, for the leadership and really setting the tone from the onset. I want to thank all the committee members, both the current 3-member and the full final that we originally had, all the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this. And Paul, I mean, what you shared, quite frankly, wasn't easy, and it kind of puts you a little bit out there, but again, respect that. So I guess just in terms of moving forward, Andrew, I just wanted to share, and I think the sentiments with Arthur, I guess, really, and in consultation with Ron, perhaps once we hear additional comments is, put forth the plan or whatever it is that you feel needs to be voted on, right, for introduction. And then we all recognize that once there is a vote, and presumably that there is going to be a majority vote to approve one of these plans, then
Oh, we lost Jeff.
yeah.
So let me do this, and then I'd like to start with Marty and
Oh wait,
here
I
we-
think Jeff is back here. So just hang on.
Okay.
Let's see. He looks to be in movement.
yeah. Sorry. So just let me. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, great. So just to wrap that up is, look, I think at some point we'll need to take a procedural motion on a plan that is up for introduction. And then once there is a vote, there's going to be the 30-day period. And I agree with Arthur that there is an awful lot of substantive and good feedback, and that it'll go through the process where the council will go through. Probably, there'll be some things, there'll be some edits and other things that maybe it may not get through, but I think there'll be a strong plan by the end of the day. And I think no matter what, we can agree that there will be an election. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Thanks.
So I'm gonna propose something, and I know not everyone's gonna be happy. I just want you to know, I have a document here that shows the deleted sections from the original December to the latest that was passed and presented. So we know full well what sections have been eliminated. We know what sections have been cut in parts and pieces. We know all the additions. We're fully aware of it. But for ease of conversation today and just to move forward, I would propose for the council to approve the draft as submitted today for introduction. Do I have a second?
Arthur is indicating that he's seconding, and as
Okay.
is Susan. But
And so if we can, all the ayes, I guess.
can you indicate? Okay. And then
3 ayes, nays.
Hi, Andrew. I'm going to vote nay. Thank you.
all right,
Okay,
And I would like to
Abstain.
abstain.
abstain. Okay. knowing this is not, okay, so the motion passes, I guess?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Have a product here. We know it's not a perfect product. We know the December product was not a perfect product, based on feedback that we received. But this allows us now to proceed here today so that we can hear from you. You can go after us all you want, keep it civil, forget it. But we're all here to make sure that we have a fair and transparent election. Please remember that, even if we disagreed with parts of this or parts of that. And I appreciate, again, everyone's engagement, everyone on camera, off camera. And with that, I will leave it up to Marty or Peter. I want to give both of you the first opportunity. Marty, because she's led a lot of these fights and efforts and campaigns, and Peter, because he was the previous chair. So maybe ladies first. Marty, you have the floor.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and I again appreciate the discussion today. I mean, this is really helpful. I do want to say that I don't lead fights. I have a long history as a civil rights activist, and I do stand up and speak my mind, and I think that's important for everyone in the village to do. I appreciate the opportunity here. I'm going to turn over my time to Peter and then come back, because I think Peter, as the chair of this committee going in, really produced a plan that I, having run many village elections over the years, and having been doing elections since I was 19, which was quite a while ago, I appreciated what the committee under Peter's leadership produced. I thought that the December 16th plan was quite good.
Okay, so you want to
let me defer to
Peter
Peter
to go first,
back.
Marty?
No, I'm going to defer my time to Peter and then come
Okay.
back. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, Peter, the floor is yours.
I'm asking you to unmute, so it should pop up. Oh.
Okay, thank you, Marty, thank you, Andrew. I just want to make one correction. To the best of my knowledge, there was one issue that was not voted on in the December 16th plan, and there were not several, there was a single one.
There were
And
two.
I believe there was only one.
No, there were two issues, or at least two issues.
There were two issues, but there was one thing that was not voted on.
No, two items that weren't voted on. I'm not going to go into this now, Peter, but I can email you the other item as well.
Okay, I'm unaware of it. And I'd be happy to talk about that, but I don't want to distract from the issue before us. So I want to speak, I have a brief statement to read that I'd like to read through completely. It will take me about 5 minutes, I think. I want to speak to the reasons the council should adopt the December 16 election plan with the two modifications that have been widely discussed. And if the council does not choose to adopt that plan, then I ask you to be aware that I and many of my neighbors believe that the January 6th plan is deeply flawed and should be substantially amended before it's considered for adoption. The December 16 plan was voted on by the entire 5-person committee after lengthy discussions of almost every aspect of the plan. There were at least 12 votes on the major provisions of that plan, almost all of which passed by 5-0 votes, including a vote on the overall plan, and the few remaining votes were 4-1. It was a good election plan. It was very much in line with VMA traditions. It was structured to give all candidates a fair chance and to give all qualified voters a safe and meaningful vote. By the end of the December meeting, my understanding was that there were only 2 objections to it, both small, in my opinion, both minor in nature, and both easily fixed. Because of those concerns, the plan was sent back to the committee, minus the 2 members who had resigned. Then what happened to the plan? It went through a major rewrite. Major structural elements were fundamentally changed, going far beyond what I understood to be the mandate of the council to address 2 minor issues. Instead, the plan was completely rewritten, and then that rewritten plan was distributed to the other members of the committee without mention of the many substantial changes that had been made. When a meeting of the committee was called a few days later, the plan was published to the public at 5:30 at the meeting, so that most members of the public had no real opportunity to examine it. And several minor items were highlighted in the document as items to be voted on, but the other major changes were not mentioned. This effectively hid those major changes both from the public and from the other committee members. The committee voted on the final plan, and as one member pointed out to me, without some members ever realizing that major changes had been made. The objections to the December plan were procedural in that a minor item had not been voted on. But with the January 6th plan, the entire plan was voted on, with the committee members not realizing that there had been major changes that had not been discussed, presented, or voted on. If we really care about procedure, let's address the procedural issues with the January 6th plan, as well as those with the December plan. In my view, what has happened here had almost nothing to do with procedure. Rather, it reflected a different set of policy preferences that I must admit I do not fully understand, but that appear to me, as I read through the document, to favor incumbents over challengers, that raise concerns about ballot security, and that put the village staff in a position to be held responsible for errors. These choices create inherent conflicts of interest for the council. First, control of the vote roll has been taken out of the hands of the independent committee and placed into the hands of the council's own staff member, the person that the council hires and fires. In my view, that effectively means that the council has taken control of the voter roll, which determines who votes and thus who's elected, creating a manifest conflict of interest. Just as judges must recuse themselves from matters involving their personal interest, the council should not be managing any part of an election in which some of its members may hope to be reelected. Why make the nomination process complicated with multiple deadlines with potential candidates? This will discourage potential challengers, and even more, it will disqualify them when they get confused and miss one of the several deadlines they must meet. Why mandate that ballots be sent to voters almost immediately after the list of candidates has been determined? Voters will likely be familiar with the incumbents, but they probably will. Why not wait until after the forum? Why not wait until more information about the challengers is known? Voting early, in my view, works against the relatively unknown challenger and to the benefit of the much better known incumbents. Why eliminate any time in the plan to fix the simple errors that many voters make in filling out their ballot envelopes? This election plan removed the phase needed to address this issue. This just eliminates the ballots of voters who have made a simple technical mistake and makes the election less representative of the community. I urge the council to be fair to the community it represents. Let's have a fair, open, impartial race between the candidates, rather than one with rules that give advantages to certain candidates. Either adopt the December 16 plan with the 2 changes, or amend the January 6 plan with the excellent amendments proposed by a group of residents that restores a fair and unbiased process. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And you raised a lot of great points, and I agree with most of them. So I really appreciate you coming on today and speaking. So I don't know if Marty wants to goes next, or if I have Elizabeth Goldberg or her husband raise their hand. So Marty,
I'm going to ask Marty to unmute to state what she wants to say.
So we'll do Marty and then the Goldbergs.
No, I'd like to let the Goldbergs speak. Thank you very much.
Marty, we won't call on you until your hand is raised again. I don't want to waste time by going back and forth.
Right.
Please.
I'm asking them to unmute now, so they should be able to. Take your time.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Happy New Year, everybody. My name is Jeffrey Goldberg. As a young man, I had the privilege of conducting 32 National Labor Relations Board elections in Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky at great cost to my own welfare and security under Landrum-Griffin or the Taft-Hartley Act. With corrupt unions, I conducted elections with the Teamsters, the Seafarers, the Inland Boatmen's Union, and the mine workers, both surface mines and below the ground. I then was selected to conduct elections in the Panama Canal when Noriega was the president of the canal zone, when there was a transition. Whenever any of those elections was a claim, just a claim, that there was a conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict of interest, a neutral board, somewhat like your ethics committee, made an investigation and a report to the public. And I think that is appropriate in this case. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Larry, please.
I'm asking him to unmute right now, so just give a second.
Yeah, I just absolutely support what Peter said. It is very apparent that that people voted evidently on something they didn't realize had been completely rewritten. I'm really interested in how that happened. But I totally 100% endorse what Peter said, and I ask the council to take the measures necessary to provide the protections and benefits that Peter's pointed out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Looking for other residents who have comments. Marty? Oh, Lynn. We'll wait. Marty will be last, and
Okay.
she will bring it all together. Go ahead, Lynn.
Hi. I tuned into the January 6th meeting. There were times when Leah was not on camera. She seemed to be out of the room. She seemed to be just suffering medically at that time. I feel there were times when votes were being taken and audibly I could not pick up anything at all that represented a vote from Leah, visually or through the ears. And I think it'd be very important that everyone on the council give a very close look and listen to the video for that meeting. And if you can pick up an indication that she was voting on some of the points that I could not perceive, then then maybe I need to get my ears and my eyes checked. But she definitely was not there. Paul, when he did vote assent, may I finish? When he did vote assent, he had said many times he's uncomfortable, and I think he was voting just because of the time constraint, and he was just basically throwing up his arms. Let's just move on. But he was not comfortable, and as he said tonight, he would like to cancel his vote, which I don't know if that's possible or not. But in the context of everything that happened, this I think should be considered that a very careful listen and look be made to that video as to whether or not Leah was really there and expressing a vote. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I think Leah is on. She wrote into the chat, "Hi, I had COVID." I remember her being pretty miserable, that she was raising hands and speaking, but I don't know if she wants to speak for herself. There she is.
Yeah, I asked her to unmute, so.
Sorry. Hi, yeah, I turned out I did have COVID after I thought I didn't. And Lynn, I did vote. I don't think that there was a time when there wasn't a majority, or when our votes weren't counted. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry that was the impression you had, but I was sick, but I was present. And my kids were climbing on me, so sometimes I did turn my camera off.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm going to again now because I'm not in my greatest shape.
Thank you for the clarification and speedy recovery, Leah. Thank you so much. Okay, other folks that haven't spoken yet? Yes, back to the Goldbergs. This time, Jeff's better half, maybe? Or
See,
My name is Elizabeth Goldberg. Thank you. Oh,
the sweeter half.
the sweeter half. We'll go with it.
I understand, Andrew, that you don't want us to repeat what has already been sent in. But I would like to say that I read carefully the January 6th draft of the 2022 election plan, and that we believe that the guiding purpose and the guardrail of election rules and procedures is to provide for free and fair elections in the Village of Martin Seditions and to ensure that all qualified voters can fully exercise their right to vote. And that said, we believe that the January 6th draft would benefit from the 5 amendments that were that Peter covered in his remarks, which I fully agree with. So I'm not going to repeat all of those. You can all read them now, but I wanted to say that there are 2 in particular that I found very, very important that stood out. And that is that the action point 3 would restore to the election committee the responsibility for developing, verifying, and certifying the voter roll, which I believe is the key function of an election committee, and one that it has historically had in Martin's editions. So the question is, why would that be taken, that very important responsibility disappear now? And the other one was the issue of mailing the ballots before the candidates forum, which I feel would be an error, a grave error, because I do agree that everyone needs to see who's running for office and what they have to say, and then, be presented with the ballots in order to make an informed choice. And and also, I like to receive the packet by the mail. It's very important for me to be able to sit down and read the candidates' statements. And in the current draft, it makes it an option, or that it would be done electronically. And I don't think that's satisfactory. I think there are many people that probably don't use email regularly, or that have trouble accessing it, whatever. I think it's standard practice for elections to receive the paper form, and I certainly hope that will be retained. And finally, I wanted to say, in that document, there's a long list of best practices towards the end in recommendation 6. And I believe that, and in particular, I wanted to call your attention to a document that I had a chance to see this week that I understand has been presented to you, Andrew, called Best Practice on Standard VMA Voter Roll Process. And that this was used prior to 2021 with satisfactory results. If these best practices were somehow incorporated into the standard operating procedures of the council and passed on to election committees, it seems that it would save time, eliminate the need to reinvent the wheel, and ensure that best practices are preserved in part of the official archive of the village. And if I were ever on an election committee, I would consider that to be a great help. So that's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Some here know the history better than I do, but there's a lot of common sense in what you just said, of course, and what has been presented to us, including the voter roll. I don't know why the election committee wouldn't lead that with the help of the village manager, but I don't see why the election committee wouldn't have that role. And also with the ballots, I recall from last year when I did 2 forums as a candidate, I did comment to neighbors. I think the majority of people have already voted. Why, this forum is maybe not going to move the needle too much. So again, I think some of this is very commonsensical, and I agree with some of your statements here. Arthur.
I'm asking you to unmute right now, Arthur. Is it not coming up? There we go.
Okay,
all right.
There we go. Okay, yeah. I actually went and talked to several past election committee members trying to verify what the history actually is. And it turns out the history is very mixed. And it's not always what the chairs remember. So given that, what I have found in talking to past committee members is that the production of the voter roll has been, and probably ought to be, a joint effort and recognized as a joint effort. So I am proposing a 2-sentence language to be put into the procedures. It's open, of course, to amendments, to editing, but the way I have it written now is 2 sentences. A preliminary voter roll is provided by the village manager. The committee may revise the roll if individuals not on the list request ballots following verification of their residency. The committee may also revise the voter roll at its discretion after verifying errors or omissions. 3 sentences. And I think that captures what actually has been done. According to the various committee members that I've talked to, this is actually the process that has been done. It hasn't been only the manager. It hasn't been only the committee. Nobody owns it. It is a joint production. And I think if we recognize it as such in the procedures, we can eliminate problems in the future. That's all I have.
Jeff?
I'm asking him to unmute now.
Hi, Andrew and everyone. First of all, thank you again, Andrew, for the leadership in signaling, the feedback we received. There's a lot of good common sense things, and we'll take that up as a committee. I just wanted to, and again, appreciate Arthur's always detailed thoughts on things, but obviously there's quite a bit of feedback here and a lot for us to absorb. So I just wanted to, before we close tonight, I'm sure you were going to do this. Maybe we could map out the process in terms of what the next 30 days looks like and how we're going to go about this in terms of, council preparing their feedback and how is that being submitted? And then, when are we going to go through that as a line item vote? I know last year it happened in real time, I believe, at the open council meeting with Ron Bolt, but just wanted to kind of have that clarification so we understand how best we can work with you to get a final plan. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that as we receive comments, and I have a feeling that we have received the bulk of them in the recent submissions, but maybe based on today's council meeting, we'll receive more. But my intent is to review all the comments and personally will for that council meeting. Also, I believe in my conversations with Ron, we're able to have either administratively or one-on-one conversations where we can provide feedback. And at the council meeting in February, we will then take that up and propose changes, additions, amendments, edits, etc. that will then have to be voted on individually and passed by a majority of the council. I think this is how it's been done in the past, and that's how I envision it. But I can be corrected as well if others have a different opinion. I'm gonna just go to Susan, who raised her hand and who hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll revert to others who have already spoken.
Hi, I'm just going to say something really basic.
Okay. Sorry. I didn't even see your hand, Susan, but it was up. So I'll go to you and then to the other Susan. Sorry, Susan Paddock.
Susan Paddock can speak first. That's okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Susan. Go ahead.
I was going to say a basic motto for an election committee could be neighbors helping neighbors vote. That if you really break it down, we're just all neighbors and we're all part of this together and we're helping each other vote. So if we care about our neighbors, I think we should care about counting their ballots. It just seems really basic. And so as we think about, or as you all think about which plan, which amendments you're going to accept, I hope that you'll think about the basic principle of enfranchisement and making sure that people's votes count, that we kind of have an even playing field for new people and incumbents to campaign on, and that we get election materials to everyone. I support what Elizabeth Goldberg said and has been pointed out that there was one word that was changed from an and to an or in the draft, in the January 6th draft, that as far as I know wasn't discussed, and it had the outcome of saying that election materials could be sent by email or sent to people in paper form at their homes. And my understanding is that it before it had said and, it would be both, and that was simply changed to or, which makes it an option. And that's really a substantive change because people want to get this in paper, and it wasn't done in 2021, and more errors were made. 4 people were, didn't have their votes counted. Who knows if that had some effect, but people have asked for that. So I think that's really basic, that should be changed back to an and I don't know why it wasn't mentioned. It was an actual change that was made in the draft.
Hey,
Also,
Susan,
yeah.
before you continue, please
Okay.
that spot for me at some point. I mean, I've been reading through this over and over again, and I may have missed it, but I really would appreciate you flagging that via email or however you wish to after, not tonight, but at some point. I appreciate it. Go
Okay,
ahead.
sure, thanks. Also, when the vote was being taken on January 6th at that meeting about changing the date from May 26th to May 23rd for counting the ballots, that we could, since we weren't going, I think the rationale was that since we weren't going to be counting the unsigned ballots, we weren't going to be curing ballot envelopes that were unsigned, we didn't need to wait. But I think that overlooked, unfortunately, the other part of what was voted on the previous meeting that everyone had talked about being so important to put in, which said proposal is to remove language that allows curing of unsigned ballots. Committee would continue to take reasonable steps to address other issues such as smudged or water damaged signatures, family members using the wrong envelope, etc. That's what was passed. So it wasn't just that you were not going to cure the unsigned ballots, it was that you were also going to cure some additional ones. So by changing that date when everything had to be counted by a few days to the very last date, to the 23rd instead of 26th, it eliminated the period in which you could potentially cure some of these ballot envelope issues. So that, again, is a substantive thing, and one more thing that can be addressed with these really excellent amendments that people have put some time into, research into, and I think they make a lot of sense, as Paul has told us about, supported those, and I think a lot of us here support those. So basically, there's a range of items that have been changed, that were not indicated in the draft. When you looked at the draft online, it had a few edits, some things that were deleted, but unfortunately some things were not shown at all that they were deleted. And so people had to go kind of do an archaeological little discovery tour. And when Peter had started to mention those at the meeting, he was cut off. He couldn't explain even fully what those were. So I appreciate that he and Marty and others have been really carefully looking at this because it does bring it to our attention. Admittedly, I know George had a lot on his plate, and it's probably hard to describe every little change that's made, but that's why I guess it was sent back to committee to make a couple of changes, and you make a whole lot more. Understandably, there's going to be pushback because where did this come from? Paul's like, wait a second, I didn't, so we understand these are complicated things. People feel passionately about whatever version of the plan they're supporting or all the research they've done. That's beautiful. But I don't think anyone wants to feel that they weren't aware of what they voted on, that there were things in there that they weren't fully explained, and there hasn't been a lot of time. I understand that. But we do have Open Meetings Act that indicate you have to, this stuff is supposed to be looked at by a lot of eyes. That helps the overall product. So anyway, good luck, and whatever you do vote on, ultimately, I hope you'll just remember we're all neighbors helping each other. We all matter. Our votes matter. Please do what you can to make sure that they count and that we have a fair, open election. Thank you. And I hope you'll vote for these amendments. Pass them. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Susan Fatick, please.
I'm asking you to unmute, so.
Right. So I just have a couple of very quick comments. I did serve as liaison to the election committee for a number of years, and I am really familiar with the voter roll. For that reason, as well as for the reason that as chair, I was sort of compelled with other, with the election committee, as well as other residents, former committee members, to try to trace the history of the voter roll management. And there have been a lot of misconceptions. I have a very thorough history compiled, and I'm happy to share that if anyone really wants to know. So that's it.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
We'll go to George, who hasn't spoken since the submission. Go ahead, George.
Thanks. So I wanted to just try and clarify something, clarify a couple of things quickly. One, discussion that changes were made without mention or notification to the other committee members is just frankly not true. The draft was circulated to the other committee members, including a clean copy of the draft and a track changes copy that showed all of the changes that were made from the previous version, was circulated to the committee members on December 30th, prior to the committee meeting on January 6th. That it was a track changes version that showed every single change, whether it was a comma being added, whether it was changing bolding on something, or specific language changes, language updates. So that was not something that was sprung on people. That was not something that was trying to do, kind of trying to sneak through the back door or frankly conduct a major rewrite. The changes that were incorporated that had previously been made were reflective of the votes that had been taken by the committee at their previous meetings. I wholeheartedly agree with Susan Kahn. I think that voting matters, and I think it is important to recognize when the committee voted on things that were not reflected in the updated draft that was presented to the council at its December meeting, that in order to prepare for the January 6th meeting, we needed a draft that reflected the previous committee activities. That's where that draft came from. It was not creation of new things. The things that were new, that were subject for discussion, were things like addressing an issue of adding a grace period that had been not previously discussed and agreed to by the committee members. It was things like including potential language indicating the timeline for developing vote counting procedures. That is something that typically happens separately from the election plan. And it was looking at, based on the changes that had been previously agreed to by the committee, did we want to make any updates to the timeline that we had agreed to? That's where those changes came from. It was based, the changes that had previously been incorporated into the draft were reflective of the previous votes. The updates, which were the parts that were flagged in the packet that was shared publicly, those were the new things. Those were the elements that were discussed at the meeting on January 6th, where, like I said, we had robust resident comment that we heard for both before and after that meeting. We had more than 2 hours of public comment on those, and I feel like they were thoroughly and well discussed to the point where at least I, as a committee member, felt I heard a number of viewpoints discussing those in detail.
Okay, thanks, George. And before there's a back and forth on this, I just want to clarify, having been copied as the liaison, I can verify those dates and those documents that were shared with the committee members. I don't know if we have to go into a discussion now as to what was deleted, what was added, etc. I think we've discussed that, and we know what the recommendation is by the group led by Marty and others. But I'm going to move to Larry and then to Peter. Larry, is this an old hand or a new hand?
I'm asking him to unmute now, so.
This is a new hand.
Okay.
The first question I have is, you made a reference, and I couldn't understand it, Andrew, about your reaction when, after the first presentation of the candidates, you said you didn't think it would do much good. Is that right? Because...
Well, I recall thinking that the forum was scheduled I don't know if it was weeks after ballots had been distributed, and my opinion was that most folks probably had already submitted their ballots and voted prior to the forum. That's kind of what I just thought at the time. And that
So you're saying that putting out the ballots that soon is probably a disservice to the new candidates.
What I was
No,
saying
let me-
exactly, that was a really valid point, and I agreed with it.
I think that Elizabeth Goldberg hit the nail right on the head. The thing is that the council and the village management have got a ton of tasks they have to do all year long. And at certain times when steps must be made about the elections, they may be busy with other stuff and not do the work that needs to be done. We also don't want somebody who cannot ignore the instructions as an employee that they're given by the village manager, etc., or the village governing people, the council. That shouldn't happen. And I think Elizabeth's point is right. The election committee has the whole year to get the voter roll straight. That is their primary job, and it should not be parsed out to anyone else. And I give the rest of my time to Peter.
Thank you, Larry. Peter?
I'm just going to ask you to unmute. Just give me 1 second.
Okay, are we ready?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, first, with respect to what George said, I don't doubt that it's true that the document was sent to committee members a few days before the January 6th meeting. The items were never discussed in public. I don't know what conversations George may have had with other members of the committee at that point, but there was never an open discussion, under the Open Meetings Act, one might have expected of most of the major changes that took place. And I'm sort of, excuse me, I'm forgetting what else I was going to say. And I don't believe that those items were ever voted on until there was a final vote in which George said, okay, let's approve the plan. And so there was a unanimous vote for the plan, but the individual items, many of which were quite substantial and really affect the character of the election, were never individually voted on, at least to the extent that I'm aware. So yes, I don't doubt that the document was sent before, but in that document, so far as I know, there was not, highlighting of, the major changes that were being indicated or created. There was no vote on those items, and the only time a vote took place was at the very end when a simple vote on the entire document was requested. And so they were never discussed in open meetings. So I think, to me, that seems like, to me that presents procedural problems.
Can I just say, Peter, real quickly, and I don't want to, prolong this, but my recollection is different, that there were individual votes held throughout, and we can all re-listen to the procedure.
There were individual votes held on some things, but many things were not voted on.
Okay, all right. I'd have to go back and look at that. Good question, Peter, just for clarification purpose, and maybe this is one of these best practice issues that needs to be reflected down the road. But when you presented your very first draft, the very first draft as chairman to the committee, was that product based on conversations with committee members one-on-one, which is permitted, or was that a product that you created and then the first time the committee members reviewed it was during your first committee meeting or the second committee meeting?
That document came from the numerous plans that are on the election committee webpage, the portion of the village website that deals with the election committee. So there was a whole series of plans laid out from 2015 through 2021. which I read through diligently, and there was basically a single plan that had been used from 2015 through 2020, and then in 2021, a dramatically different plan was adopted. And so I simply took the basic plan that had been used by the village for the last 5 or 6 years, if not quite sure how long. I'm not sure what the procedures were before that, but it had been used without objection by the village up to that point. So that was the basis. That was where
I remember that now, Peter. Thank you for the refresher. Sorry, go ahead. So you had other points. Sorry for interrupting.
There's just one other thing. One thing I want to say. So this issue of what was something that was included in the plan that I presented in December, that was not voted on. So here's what happened. You know, at the November meeting, Councilmember Katie Howard had made a major point about this issue of a small grace period for emails in particular, you know, that might be sent before the deadline but come in after the deadline. And you know, I had meant to address it during the subsequent committee meeting, but you know, with all the things that were happening, I overlooked it, and so it had not been voted on. And I attempted during the December 16 council meeting to say that I know this is new, and I want to explain what happened. But that meeting was, you know, there were a lot of attacks being leveled against me, a lot of charges and counter charges and amplifications of charges that I felt were very, very unfair, and that frankly, it's even getting me upset now thinking about it. Upset me very much. And I couldn't really think straight. I really couldn't speak coherently about what was going on. My plan at the time, and you know, I also want to say, there's one more point I want to make about this. But my expectation was, I had understood from numerous sources, from Niles, from council members and so on, that, you know, whatever the committee voted on would be presented to the council, and then the council could do what they liked with it, and that obviously is true. And so I thought, well, this is just a small thing. You know, it's a grace period of just a few minutes that, you know, allows something that was sent on time but arrived late. Seemed like a small thing. This is something that could be presented to the council. I understood that, at least my understanding at the time was that the document had to be presented to the council no later than the December meeting. And there was no time to have another committee meeting. And so how do I handle this problem? I know that Katie really wanted this. It seemed important. It seemed quite reasonable. And yet, and no one that I had spoken to about it, including several committee members, had objected in the slightest. It seemed quite simple that this is something that could be taken to the council and dealt with there. I attempted to do that, and with the wild attacks that were going on against me, I simply lost my ability to speak coherently or not to need to blow my nose on camera. So that's what that was about, and I apologize for it. Clearly, it was a misunderstanding of procedure. And
I have to say, Peter, there's no need for you to apologize. Okay, let's just start with that. I think we can all agree that council meeting could have gone much better on everyone's part. I just recall, and I'm happy to take the blame for that meeting, but I recall there were 2 items that because I'm sitting in an election committee.
Let me speak to the second one, if I may.
Okay. But let me just say this. Let me just say this. And I've said this before. We could have just accepted it, and we probably should have just accepted it and moved on. But we talk about and disenfranchising folks. I just asked to the committee members, did you vote on this? And maybe the best thing is just to have the committee vote on it, just to clarify it, so there are no questions. There's no.
It's already been voted on in the January 6th.
No. About your draft.
I see. Okay.
Go ahead, Peter.
Okay. So the other issue that arose was with respect to a single sentence dealing with ballot curing. Arthur had come to the December 13 committee meeting, and we had an extended discussion about ballot curing. And of course, it's the right and proper thing to do. And Arthur was more cautious about it, but ultimately accepted the concept, but asked that a small limitation be put into the document. And I completely accepted what Arthur wanted to do. I did not object to it. My personal view is that even unsigned ballots could be cured and should be cured, but it seemed like a not completely unreasonable limitation, and so I accepted it, and that's all. And I just made an editing error in presenting the document that was finally sent.
I remember that was the one. You're right. Again, listen, we're all volunteers. We all, I think, have the best interests of this community in mind, and so I apologize for how that meeting went off the rails. I talked to you afterwards. I went to Nat's home and asked both you and Natalie to reconsider your resignations. I was rebuffed. I understood the fact that they're incumbents in on this council is amazing, given some of the drama that's happening. 2 years, there's one term is plenty for most human beings. But anyway,
I just want to say that I'm glad you couldn't come to my house with flowers. I appreciate it.
It was an orchid, and she said, "I will not accept it, and I will let it die." So I wanted to call her bluff. She said, "I'll take it to the village office." I called her bluff, and she wasn't bluffing. Next thing I know, I heard from Niles, who said, "I have a pretty orchid that just arrived," which I then claimed, and it's now in my kitchen, and I think of Natalie every time I see it. Anyway. We're off message here, but I think we're all, as Susan has said, we're all neighbors, and I think we all extensions. And so, you have something else, Peter?
Yes, I do, and that is,
and then Paul,
that the procedural error that I made with respect to something that we intended to include, but that I had neglected to include as a vote in the meeting just before the council meeting. And so I did not understand the procedure. And there is no place that committee procedure, or for that matter, as far as I know, council procedure is written down. And I'm not sure why that is, but it does present the possibility of people making procedural errors, such as the one that I made. And, I think it's really imperative, if you expect people to adhere strictly to procedural norms, that those be written down somewhere so that we can know where they are, know what they are, and vote on them. And I would urge, as a project for the council or for whatever benighted souls there are that really enjoy this sort of thing, to really do some kind of procedural document that committee members can rely on, particularly committee chairs, can rely on. What is supposed to be done? When are votes supposed to be taken? How do non-voted but things like mine get presented to the council? There's a whole raft of procedural issues that are nowhere written down, that we are just expected to have imbibed from the air. And I recommend that as a project for the council to consider.
And then Arthur's been working on that, so as he wrote in the chat, it's forthcoming. So let's go to Paul Weller, please. Thank you, Peter.
Sure.
This is pertinent to what we were just talking about, Mr. Chairman. I feel lonely. Is there any way we can put 2 more people back on our committee? We need their advice and counsel, and one of them just spoke. But I think a member committee makes more sense than a 3-member committee. With all these issues that are out there, I mean, we've been going over a tremendous number of paper, as you know, and we need more than 3 people. And I wish the council would consider that.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, and I've been an advocate of that, and I'm happy to take that into consideration with my other council members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. I think most folks have spoken except for Marty. Unless there are others who'd like to speak, I'd love to. Oh, iPad went up. iPad, I think that's Tiffany. Go for it. And then Katie, you want to say something? Okay. Let's start. Okay.
Thank you. If I kind of read them, I think I attended most of the election committee meetings this fall, and I want to say, for me, the first time I saw legislative language was the January 6th meeting, and that made it easier for me as a resident to kind of follow the process. So to Katie's question earlier about, what happened with the documents, I went on the village website before this meeting, and the one draft that I see is the one from the meeting on the 6th. I think that, and to me, that was the issue that arose in the December council meeting. What I understood you, Mr. Chairman, to raise was, hey, has everybody reviewed the legislative language? And the answer was no. And so that's why it went back. Whether there were 2 issues or 3 issues or 10 issues, those were symptoms of the question that was being posed. And so, it went back to the committee, and it's totally the committee's prerogative to make improvements to the language. I think I've heard a couple of people say it was a violation of the Open Meetings Act. It's not the case. A draft can be, changed and recirculated as long as the committee doesn't discuss the substance of that draft by email. It's actually a best practice for the draft to be circulated and give people time to review it before their open business meeting so they can make progress in the meetings. When I did a brief comparison between the January 6th draft this year and the only 2 other mail-in elections that we've had in Martin's Additions 2020 and 2021, the drafts were very similar. A few changes made, but as far as the meat and potatoes of the plan, not exactly the same, but again, very similar to the last 2 mail-in elections. So I appreciate the council moving forward, and I think, again, having something for people to actually talk about, and self-servingly, I've already sent my comments to the council in track changes. As everybody knows, I love a good track change. And I'm happy to talk with you guys about those comments. I'd also say, I briefly reviewed some of the comments that were circulated today to the village, and I've listened tonight, and I think, again, just having a basic understanding of the legislative process would help clarify some of the concerns that people are raising, because procedurally things have gone as this would go. I also think just basic history about village operations and governing law will help inform the council. And the last thing, I think it's just it's great that you guys are offering this time for us tonight, and I hope if you have specific follow-ups, as you reach out, I put my name in there as someone to talk with you, as having been a council member for years and also having been an election committee chairperson. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany. Katie?
Just give me 1 second. All right. You should be good. Yep.
Hey, I love track changes. Who doesn't love track changes? I also have a mug of red pens, like the old red pen edits on a document. So I'm appreciative of the editing process. I just wanted to backpedal to Peter again and to comment about the latest draft. I'm extremely appreciative of the grace period language that resulted in the December draft and the January 6th draft. I would just like to explain that. But the reason that I abstained from the vote tonight was this very reason. It's not to be wishy-washy, but it's more or less out of protest or communication all along. And I'm sorry that it resulted in 2 resignations. Hey, don't hate the player, hate the game. Let's make the game better and move forward. But I wanted to explain my position in abstaining tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, I think most folks that wanted to speak have spoken, with one exception, and I would ask, I'd love for this to be a shorter, not a 3-hour meeting. So perhaps Marty will be our last resident comment, and I'll then it over to the council for any other final comments, and then we'll adjourn. So Marty, with that, you have the floor.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to all the residents who are obviously very concerned about our community engagement, as you all know. I want to thank the council for the opportunity to discuss specific procedures tonight and talk a little bit about format and process. A couple points to make, so thank you for bearing with me. I will be brief. In terms of format, Andrew, this meeting tonight was very open. It was easy for people to talk, and people, I think, felt welcome and safe speaking. And I think the cordiality and civility we saw tonight reflects the council format of people feeling confident that we will be heard. And thank you for that. That really makes a big difference. Good open meetings make a huge difference. In terms of format, the January 6th election committee meeting was very different. Yes, residents spoke at length because people do care about elections, but we were only allowed to speak at the beginning and the end. And it was very difficult for residents to have comments or even questions as the votes are being taken. Most of the votes were taken, there were 12, and they were taken on fairly trivial items. The format of the meeting did not let residents speak during that process, topic by topic, item by item. And I would like to encourage the council to really have all the committees, all the committees, not just elections, really adopt the council process of letting residents speak item by item as we go through an agenda. It's just much more collegial, much more cordial, and much more respectful. I think it comes across as respectful. So that's a format issue for all public meetings, I think, going forward. And thank you for doing it on the council level. I'm sorry it wasn't done on January 6th. There are a couple other points, just picking up sort of pieces here. Arthur, I'm really surprised you didn't call me about the voting rules. I'm the one who did most of the verification for all those years and wrote up procedures at various times. January 2020 support staff document had them in it on the staff side of what they needed to do. I'd written up procedures, just a quick summary description of what we did. And, I ran the procedures by Gene Sperling, for example, and I learned them from Frank Carell. So we have, in fact, had a pretty consistent set of for many, many years, probably a decade. Frank probably learned it from Ted Stoddard and Holland. And that process very much is about getting an election firewall, which is stated in the charter, that the employees of the council don't define who gets a ballot, that you have an independent, impartial election committee certify a voter roll. And what I did with Matt, for example, Matt Trollinger, and with Beth before him, was very routine. I mean, we didn't really have to have a written procedure about it because Frank Carell told me what to do. And it went very smoothly. It was not hard for the election committee and to do it. We checked the directory, update that. We checked the Montgomery County voter list for our 2 precincts. If needed, we could check property records. That only takes 2 seconds online. It was a very smooth process. And I do think that I think it was Elizabeth Goldberg said that verification process ought to be formally adopted. The committee back in 2006 adopted a forum procedure formally, and that's been used ever since. We never adopted a formal verification process because it would be like tying your shoes. It was so routine. It came in 2021, it was not verified because the entire response was on the staff, which I personally consider very unfair to the staff. And also, structurally, you don't want the incumbents employees doing your voter roll. I mean, conflict of interest. Several people have talked about that. I don't need to repeat it. But there is a reason, Arthur, why it's an independent verification. Yes, whether the council is running the voter roll, as was done in one for employees, or whether the independent election committee is doing the voter roll, really matters in terms of the integrity of the election. And the process, again, should probably be codified. I did a nice description of it. And I was the one who did it, so I think that description works. I know that Susan Faddick has questioned that in the past and disputed it, but I was the one who was doing it. And so I think that it would be appropriate to, consult with me if you would like to have any further information on that. And again, it was not a big deal until it wasn't done. And that was 2021 when we had all the invalid ballots and potential voter fraud. I mean, if you don't have an accurate election roll, then you don't have an accurate election. So I would be happy to talk to you more about the voter roll. Let me go back to a couple other items. Process issues. A lot of the changes that were substantive that Peter and others have referred to in the January 6th plan were in fact reversions to things that have been done in 2021. And I would simply note in terms of process that the 2021 election committee held only two open meetings, two general open meetings. The last one was in September, and then had no open meetings from then until the time that they brought the 21 final plan, to the council. And that was very unusual. Frank Carell and I, in January 2021, sent a memo, an official letter, a formal letter to the council saying, whoa, heads up. How did this get adopted? There were no open meetings, and there was no committee vote by the 2021 election committee to ever adopt any of the specific procedures like, Peter has done and George did in January. There was no votes on specific procedures. There were two generic general meetings and then nothing until suddenly the 21 plan was produced full blown to be presented to the council. And at the time, two previous committee chairs, Frank Carell and I, had been doing the committee chairmanship for 14, 15 years between us. We sent a formal letter to the council saying, whoa, what's up? And asked for a committee meeting back then to have a vote on the 21 plan. It never happened. We were turned down. So I think it's really essential to underscore that we do need procedures in writing. We do need open meetings on specific election regulations, not just on a general overall plan. And we need to make sure that we have public votes because the issues here, I mean, in December, the plan that the 5-person committee had approved was sent back for two minor items, one of which didn't have a grace period. This January 6th plan had many major items that actually never had a vote. Peter's correct about that. There was no vote, for example, to delete the voter roll responsibility and give it back to the staff, which the January 6th plan does. And again, that's the core of the election, so that's pretty important, whether you have an independent election, an independent voter roll that's duly verified or not. That's a biggie. There was no vote on that on January 6th, but it was done. The vote to make the mail packet optional, there was no vote on that on January 6th. It was just that and or. And by the way, Andrew, that's on line 102, where the and or was changed. Line 102 of the January 6th plan says or, the December plan said and. The decision to change that date from May 26th to May 23rd for the vote counting, which eliminated all possibility of correcting any envelope errors, that directly contradicted a vote by the committee at December 13th, by the full committee, to allow some envelopes to be. And again, that was not something that was voted on as a separate standalone thing. It was presented as a date change from May 26th to May 23rd for the vote counting date. It was not presented for what it was, which was the elimination of all possible ballot curing, contrary to the vote of the full committee on the 13th. So I'm just asking here to sort of like think about standards. Because if the council last year adopted an election plan that had no public votes whatsoever and almost no public meetings, certainly none on any specific items and none on the overall plan in 2021, it strikes me as, I don't know what the word I want is, but odd to not introduce a plan in December this year that was voted on by the full committee because of one minor vote issue that got bounced back. And when it got bounced back, it left open an opportunity to make these really structural changes that were in fact reversions to the 21 plan. Tiffany's right. The 21 plan was, and Peter was right, the 21 plan was very different. And I can tell you the background on what happened in 2020, if you'd like. I would suggest you look at the June 29th, 2020 election committee report to the council about the 2020 election for some details on that. There's a written report in the record. I'd be glad to send it to you. My issue here is that there seems to be a huge contradiction in standards. The December plan got kicked back because of one line, to clarify the voting, the envelope curing provisions, and one vote on a minor detail about the grace period, which everybody supported. It was clear from the December 13th committee meeting that everybody supported it. It just hadn't been a vote. And now we have a January 6th plan where major structural issues have not been voted on. And I would not suggest that you send this back to the committee again, because we're already delayed. It got delayed in November. The plan in November could have been introduced. The plan in December could have been introduced. Now we're here in January, and I thank you for having this special meeting, because I think it's really essential to stay with the election timetable. The election cycle starts February 18th. But I really want you to think hard about the fact that there were not votes on a lot of specific items in that January 6th meeting. There were not votes. And in 2021, there were not votes on any of the items or the final plan. And so let's just be very clean in our process. You know, I'm a good government geek, and I really care about clean, open, transparent processes. And I think one of the reasons Katie was confused, like many of us, is, you know, what is the process here? Peter's point about codifying the process. Arthur, thank you for trying to start to do that. I appreciate your efforts very much. But let's be real clear and clean about how we do things. And again, on the voter roll verification, that process has been used probably for decades. I learned it from Frank Burrell. I described what we did, and I'm the one who did it, so I think that's a pretty credible description. It's also confirmed by what I wrote last year about it, and by what the committee did it in January 2020. That's not a new process at all. And it's a very clean process if you do it right, which is clean up the directory, use the precinct voter lists, and then do verification of any remaining addresses. Usually there aren't more than 8 or 10 that you have to check. It's not a big deal to do it. And everyone who has said that the committee, the independent impartial committee, needs to do the voter roll is absolutely correct. That is an essential element for a fair and sound election. And the staff is going to help, you know, either way with the preliminary staff work. Of course they are. But council employees should not be determining the voter roll at all. That decision has to be with the committee. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer any questions about any of this election stuff, because I do sort of know it, to say the least. So thank you for anyone. And I would appreciate actually being consulted, given the background here. We have a lot of people who know about elections in B of A, and I'm just one of them. Thank you. You know, Jean Sperling has also got a lot of expertise, and I appreciate you checking with her. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. I appreciate it. Okay, this concludes the resident comment period. I want to conclude with giving council members one last opportunity before we adjourn. I really appreciate everyone's thoughtfulness and stamina. It's not one of the longest meetings we've had, but I appreciate everyone sticking around and providing us with such great feedback. Arthur. Then Jeff.
Okay, yeah, just a quick response to Marty. The reason I didn't talk to you about it, I had your written document. You had a very clear description of what you had done, and so I didn't feel necessary to go talk to you, but I did talk to people on your committee and other committees over the past. So I was just trying to get a sense of how things had happened in the past. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you, Arthur. Jeff and Susan Fatic.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. First, again, just thanking Andrew for guiding us through this in a very thoughtful, methodical way. We're, again, very respectfully hearing all the different feedback. And I really do look forward in the days and weeks ahead to looking at these recommendations. And then as council, again, voting on them. And we'll have, I think, at the end of the day, a really great plan. And, of course, we'll have an election, which is great. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over. And again, thanks so much for everyone's time and effort.
Thank you, Jeff. Susan?
Right. Just thanks for everyone participating. Thanks to the committee for doing a really great job of getting all this laid out very coherently. There are a number of discrepancies in how election issues have been conducted in the past. And I have some documents that I am happy to share, and I will probably be posting those to clarify the actual history of election plan procedures and the conduct of elections in past. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thank you very much to everyone. for joining this evening, and we'll. Katie, did you want to say something? I'm sorry. You did like a kind of a half hand up, but then it went down. Please, Katie.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify, I am not confused about the draft or the legislative process. I actually find that kind of language patronizing. I am just seeking clarification for the people, all the residents who are coming in new, who are getting active in this election. I'm excited to see who the big three will be on the, who are going to run and who we'll be working with next spring or this spring. It's been a blur because we're in a pandemic at the end of the day, and the time is, just a blur. But specifically, I would like to thank Leah Craft on the committee because she was so sick during the last committee meeting, and to publicly admit that she had COVID, she shouldn't have had to do that tonight. I'm calling for kindness by everyone. And thank you, Leah, for sticking it out. That must have been brutal. So thank you.
Yes, I would second that. That was whatever it was that you had during that committee meeting. It looked brutal and painful, and we were all suffering with you, but not obviously like you were suffering. So thank you again for doing that. Thanks for reminding us, Katie, that our resident volunteers they're working hard through sickness and painfully long meetings. So with that. I would motion.
Respect is a two-way street.
Pardon?
Respect is a two-way street.
Yep, absolutely. I'd motion to adjourn. Do we have someone who'd like to motion?
Yeah.
Was there a second?
Yeah. I saw. So Arthur moved. Susan seconded. All in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
9/11.
Good night.
Okay, I'm going to end the meeting for all, just so that nobody has to do anything. Okay?
Thank you, Niles.